And good evening to our fellow followers and listeners. Tonight is Sunday, January 14th at 8:16 p.m. This is Federico Lyons of States' Rights Radio and
Seth Hancock of Seth Hancock Reports. Tonight's episode, we'll be talking about the 2024 GOP Primary, Iowa Populist caucus, and the charade continues. So we got the Iowa caucus. Tomorrow is the first... I don't know if we call it a vote because it's not, they're not casting ballots, but they're caucusing. But, it's the first official vote of the 2024 presidential election. So I guess first thing we can talk about is just our thoughts on what we kind of predict is going to happen tomorrow. Me personally, I think Trump's going to win because it's cold out there. I think he was going to win anyways. He's popular out there. I don't get it, but he's popular, and Trump is going to probably, I think, is going to benefit from the cold and the snow and weather that I'm feeling here. Federico's not feeling it down in Florida like us up here, but I think it helps Trump because that means the most dedicated supporters are going to show up, and whether I like it or not, Trump's got the most dedicated supporters.
Yeah, no, you're right. They got the most... I don't know if, dedicated, or what's another word I would use than not dedicated?
Devoted?
Devoted. I would say devoted, yeah, right, Seth? Devoted. But even more than devoted, I would say devoted because cults are like a devoted cult. So, I would say devoted, yeah. Yeah, no, maybe they do like the cold. I would stay indoors. First of all, I hate caucuses. I have no idea why Iowa ever did this to primaries, to have a caucus. Caucuses is not what the framers had vision. So, to me, I think Iowa's first, well, it's not even a primary, but the first get-together to pick a candidate is useless and unconstitutional, but I digress. But, yeah, I do think, I do believe that Trump will win Iowa. I would say Nikki Haley will come second. DeSantis will come third. And then I think Nikki Haley will win New Hampshire because that's more of a establishment state than Iowa. Iowa's always been New Hampshire's always been kind of brouhaha, but it's been predominantly more Republican than Democrat. They had a few governors who were Democrat, but it's predominantly more Republican. But the sad thing is that I've seen on social media where going back to these devoted individuals for Trump, where they said that they wouldn't mind having a dictator, that this country needs a dictator. Since when? We repudiated the idea of a Wilsonian government, and we repudiated that administration. The same thing with FDR and Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon and so on. And right now, it's okay for this. I'm just boggled the mind that these people wouldn't mind. So throws away the Constitution and puts in a new clause called the dictatorial clause. It's just outrageous how people are that, they really just say what they say without any sense of logic or legal matters or the Constitution. It just really boggles the mind. And, I share with Seth before the show a clip of a Trump supporter that said these things. And no words can describe that thing. I'm just bedazzled. How about you?
Yeah, and the thing is that, and I guess I don't really call myself conservative anymore because I don't know what conservatives believe, to be honest. They've lost, the conservative movement has no principles, but I still it's kind of language that's hard to get rid of because I was a conservative for so long, and but when I think of conservatism, what I always thought it was, and when it was what I thought it was, being limited government, a focus on liberty. You can never say that about any candidate. You can't call for a dictator ever if you're truly a conservative. And there's so many people who call themselves conservatives who are, who probably love listening to somebody like that say that about Trump, that we need him to be a dictator. I'm sorry, you are not a conservative. You're a statist. You're an authoritarian. Knock it off. I mean, that's the biggest problem I have with everything that we see in this is the dishonesty. People calling themselves conservative and yet rallying behind big government, as long as it's their guy, and that's just antithetical to what I always thought conservatism meant.
Yeah, and I just also realized that the governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, just endorsed Donald Trump, and I'm like, this is the guy that actually quoted the Constitution, the 10th Amendment, and now he's endorsing a guy that actually wants to be a dictator and all that, and that's why the charade continues of this populist ideology that it just upsets me, and it just really does. So, I mean, I thought he was a genuine kind of guy saying, hey, I'm a governor of a state and I believe in the Constitution and we have to look at the 10th Amendment. It's a shame he didn't say we got to look at the 9th Amendment too, because that's also a very important amendment, which is individual rights, but that's fine. I digress. But, for him to say that he supports Trump and here's a man that wants to be a dictator for a day, I'm not going to support him, and I'm going to criticize him. So that's very disillusioned and very upsetting to see that the charade continues with this Trumpism. But just to point out your definition of conservatism, the funny thing is that when I was out, at a local bar and two tourists from New Jersey were there, and they were liberal Democrats, but they asked me, what is the new definition of conservatism? And I said, well, I mean, honestly, it doesn't exist anymore. Because, I mean, you could say that conservatism is pro-life, but yet again, you're invoking on the rights of individual citizens and within the state to promote that, because you have Donald Trump saying that he wants to pass a national abortion act, a national pro-life act, and that's not conservative. That's not, that's not even conservatism. That's not constitutionalism. You really should not pass a national act to do something like that because other states may not like it. I mean, I'm not pro-life or pro-choice. I'm what the individual and the state wants. So, and then you have marriage. And, I remember back in 2005 where also President Bush II tried to propose a constitutional amendment on traditional marriage. I mean, that's not conservatism either. You're telling states like California, we're going to have a traditional marriage amendment, so, same-sex marriage or whatever kind of marriage is now going to be legal, and it's not going to be a man and a woman. I mean, that's not up to you. Marriage should be up to the individual and the state, and predominantly more to the individual because it comes before the 10th. So, nowadays, conservatism doesn't exist anymore. I call myself a constitutionalist, and I will look at the Constitution as is. And right now, with states banning Trump, and Trump is asking the Supreme Court to rule on his behalf, I hope that the Supreme Court won't do that, that they will look into the Constitution in Article 2. And that's what we have now. We have federalism, and we have Trumpism, because sadly, that's all what we have left. I mean, there's no longer conservatism or liberalism. There's not, it's either Republican or Democrat or liberal or constitutionalist. That's how I see it. And then I know that Seth's going to bring up that this is no longer a two-party system. This is a unitary two-party system control. And I'll let Seth take the lead on that and let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you just look at the way government operates. It doesn't matter which party's in power, the government always gets bigger. The only difference is, what bureaucracy each party favors the most. I mean, the Republicans favor the military-industrial complex, and the Democrats favor like the education-industrial complex, and it's just which bureaucracies they favor more, and they increase every bureaucracy when they're in power, and that's the reality. It's that they are always working against us. And one of the ways is Social Security. I'm just appalled at this. That there was this debate between Haley and DeSantis last week. Didn't see it, but it was, again, I didn't even know that there was going to be a debate, and then I start seeing headlines about the debate, and like, okay, and I just looked up wanting to see some clips from it, and the first thing that pops up is Haley and DeSantis sparring over Social Security, and so I wanted to listen to that, and here they are, both trying to assure the audience that they have no desire to touch Social Security. Social Security is this great program, and Donald Trump has called it a great program. Donald Trump has complained that Biden wants to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, and I'm just like, we if people don't understand, and I understand I guess what makes me more frustrated is not just that they're saying it, but the reason they're saying it. They're saying it because most Americans think of these as just great programs. They don't want it touched. They want their entitlements, and it frustrates me as somebody who understand. I mean, anybody who calls themselves conservative should understand Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. It can never be truly able to last. It will collapse at some point. It's reliant on more younger people paying into it, and to pay off the older people, because guess what? The government's already spent your Social Security you put in for the many years you were working. So you're actually not getting your money back. You're getting somebody else's money. It's a Ponzi scheme. And, I've always been one, like, I'm not calling to cut Social Security overnight. Because we have made promises and there are people who rely on it, but we need to have the goal to eliminate these programs and do it in a way that doesn't hurt people as much as possible. But that's got to be the goal, to get rid of it. Instead, we've got the Republicans clamoring that this is a great program. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, when I also saw DeSantis and Haley spew off on protection of Social Security, I just, I said to myself, are these Democrat candidates or Republican candidates? It doesn't really matter, because, it's like when the Affordable Care Act, when the Affordable Care Act, because I don't want to call it Obamacare because I don't want to give him credit. When the Affordable Care Act came into play, Rick Scott opened his wide open arms, says, I'll take the Medicare money. Yeah, of course, because he wants to protect his voter base. But Bobby Jindal, when he was governor of Louisiana, he said, no, I'm not going to take that money. You can give it to another state. Louisiana will not touch 1 cent of that Medicare money. And, that was him. Maybe Louisiana has a Medicare program on their own. That's fine. But, it's all about voter base, because, I know why DeSantis said that he won't touch Social Security. It's like that episode of Seinfeld where Kramer's running for condo board president, and it says that Kramer promises to increase Social Security. So DeSantis promises to increase Social Security just to get that voter base, just to get those, senior citizens down here in Florida, to maintain that money. And the sad thing is that the younger generation, not mine, but the younger generation, they're not working like me. They're not putting into the system, so that system will collapse. The Generation Z, the millennials, they're not collecting their W-2s and paying off into the system like I am, they're doing something. They're doing menial job tasks like DoorDash and Uber driver and Uber driver, and they're making whatever they want to make, but they're not putting that as a tax because they're not deducting it. So, and they're not reporting it. So that's one area where this system will collapse, and the senior citizens, they're not going to, they're not going to enjoy it. I'm not going to enjoy it because it's going to be gone. Because you're right, it is a Ponzi scheme. It's been a Ponzi scheme ever since the Supreme Court labeled it as a tax. This is not a tax, folks. Just because they label it as a tax, thank you to the 16th Amendment, this now it's labeled as a tax, and we're paying off on it. I just saw my W-2 and I made over $5,000 withhold of that money for 2023, around $5,000. That's money that could go back to me because that's my money. I earned that money, and the government is taking away. So when I hear Donald Trump say that America is not a socialist nation, that ticks me off profoundly, because we are a socialist nation, because you're taking away my money. And, for DeSantis and Haley, that they want to protect it, they want to protect what? Socialism? They want to protect the central autocracy? No, they want to protect their pockets to protect their voters to get elected. So that's what really just ticks me off. And people need to understand Social Security is not a great system. It is really not. It's socialism, and it must be stopped.
Yeah, and people need to recognize that what is Social Security? It is the government planning your retirement for you. I mean, this should be appalling to everybody who calls themselves Republican, calls themselves conservative. But that is what the system is. It's the government planning your retirement, and they aren't doing a good job at it. But and it's in so many ways. I mean, there are people who don't even plan on retiring, people who want to work their entire lives. Why should they have to be forced into the system? Why can't we have a private market where, banks would be, if banks were set free and they weren't, we didn't have the command and control system that we have, banks would be competing for different types of retirement planning services that they could provide, and people would have choices and options, and people could say, I don't want to plan for retirement because I don't plan on retiring. But it's ultimately, you are letting the government control your life, and people, they don't see it, and they need to, and it's just so frustrating that you can't. And you brought up Obamacare, and it's the same thing with that. And the Republicans were always, because they did an effective job of labeling this program to Obama, and every Republican's supposed to hate Obama, so we hate that program, even though it was Mitt Romney who designed it originally. But what was their solution to that? Well, we're going to repeal and replace it with our own big government program. And that's, nobody talks about, in these debates, they never do. They never talk about what is the role of the government. I think the government has no role in health care. That's up to the individual to provide for their own health care and medical insurance and whatever they need. This is not the government's role. And so, I even back when I was still calling myself a Republican, and I was, voting in every Republican primary, I always had a problem with that. I'm like, no, we don't need to repeal and replace it. We need to repeal it and return our healthcare system to a free market. But that's never the answer for the politicians.
No, it's not. And nowadays, with the 2008 election, well, I would say 2008 was the beginning of this celebrity status of politicians, and of course Donald Trump, who was the celebrity at Tempest, which I never watched the show because I thought it was a stupid show. It's this celebrity status, populist status of now that Washington D.C. politics. And like Jack Abramoff said, DC is just like Hollywood, but with ugly faces. That's what it is. It's DC with ugly faces. There's no longer a charming candidate. I mean, I would say the last charming candidate was JFK. People say Bill Clinton was charming, but I'd say more JFK. But, and the thing with Affordable Care Act, you mentioned Romney Care. I have no problem if Governor Romney, when he was governor of Massachusetts, if he wanted to install a state healthcare program. That's fine and dandy. As long as there's no federal funding into it, I don't care what he does with his state money. See, that's what I love about Calvin Coolidge. When he was governor of Massachusetts, he was a very progressive governor, and I'm sure that he did not receive any federal funding when he was governor. But when he got to the national stage and when he got to be president in 1923, he stopped being progressive and started being constitutionalist. And everything he did was with according to the Constitution. There's of course some bad apples with the Immigration Act, but federal government thinks that they have a charge to control the naturalization clause, which I disagree with him. But that being said, I don't mind if Governor Romney wants to create. Now I don't know if Romney Care ever received federal funds. I'm sure it did. Bad on him if he did, because I think that was wrong. But if he wants to do it on a state level, I have no problem. But what I do have a problem is the Affordable Care Act is a national legislation, and I think that national politics should not be national with funds from different states and all that. To quote from Barry Goldwater, which another another legislator of mine that's deceased, and he goes, "The truth, of course, is that the federal government has no funds except those it extracts from the taxpayers who reside in the various states." That's what the federal government has become. That's what we've become, and we've kind of we kind of like that for the majority of people, that they want, Floridians to receive money from New York, or Illinois taxpayers to receive money from Indiana. They want that. They want that tax money because, again, I don't know how the budget is for Illinois, but, they're receiving tax money from Indiana and Florida and vice versa. So these red states, blue states, they're force feeding each other. It's not blue states feeding red states, or it's both of them. It's red states feeding blue states and blue states feeding, because the senator delegation is trying to do that. So, but going back to, this populist scheme, it's now a celebrity status of American Idol, and I like it. I like the American Idol model. I don't want it for politics. So please, when you vote, just don't vote for the populist scumbag out there. Vote for who you can trust. In this case, for me, nobody. But for you, you might trust somebody. But just because he talks funny or talks, whatever. Just, listen to his true ideas and vote with your conscience, for God's sakes.
Yeah, and vote for and there's no candidate for this, but vote for liberty. I mean, and the best place to look for that is locally. If there aren't people running locally for positions that are going to stand up to the overzealous federal government, then find somebody and recruit them, or run yourself. But the focus has to be on liberty. It's not about, I always have had a problem with, like jobs presidents. People want jobs. It's the economy, stupid. Well, again, I believe in a free market. In a free market system, the government basically has no role in the economy. That's up to free people making the economy great and not relying on the government to make jobs. It's the role of government should be. It isn't today, but this is what it should be under the Constitution. It should be to protect our liberty and, defend us from foreign threats, which, not make foreign threats like our military-industrial complex, which is creating more and more enemies for us. But the job of the government is to defend our liberty, not to create a great economy, not to provide a social safety net. That's not the federal government, at least. I mean, if you want to talk about social safety net, maybe there's a place for state and local, but even there, I'm kind of opposed. I think it should be churches providing social safety nets and free people creating charitable institutions. But the focus should be on liberty and preserving liberty. And unfortunately, we are just so involved in this tribalistic society that, it's all about getting your team in there, and and there's no guiding principles. As long as your team's in place, everything's great. If the other team is in place, everything sucks. And it's like I can't listen to conservative media that blames blames price inflation on Biden. Biden's awful. I agree, but you cannot say that the price inflation is Biden's problem alone. What about the CARES Act? What about Donald Trump's massive spending? It's both parties are to blame. Both Trump and Biden are to blame. And but we'll never fix anything if we keep in this tribalist delusion where my team's good when it does something that I would call bad from the other team, and vice versa. But it's if we keep this tribalist mentality, things are just going to keep getting worse, and people need to wake up to that and reject the tribalist mentality and look for statesmen. That's the thing is we need politicians who are going to be honest with the American people. I mean, if to be honest, let's say I was running for president, I would have to be honest with the American people and the policies that I would be pursuing. I'd have to be honest that, look, there's going to be hard time. Look, if we started doing what's right tomorrow, people are going to start losing certain benefits. People would start losing this program and that program, and it's going to cause some pain, but it's needed to be done because this is not the role of government. But everybody's playing up to the populist, to the populism. People don't want people want to think that this socialist system that we have, which they don't view as socialist because this is America, and America will never be a socialist nation, even though I'm telling you socialism. People want that. And, if you want liberty, there's going to be some pain to get there, but it's got to be done, and nobody's willing to be honest with the American people.
No, you're right. No one's going to be honest. And then you have people like Rand Paul that he hasn't really endorsed anybody, but yet he's saying that he just came up with a website says Never Nikki, but he's actually said, I've been a strong supporter of Donald Trump, and then I spoke with Bobby Kennedy. Great, you spoke to a Kennedy Democrat. Oh, that's nice. I mean, it's even, since, I want to see a research if there was ever a national senator that actually endorsed Lincoln for president, or a national senator that endorsed John Breckinridge or Stephen Douglas for president. I really don't see if a national senator actually endorsed a candidate for president, because it's not your job to be supportive. It's your job to support the Constitution, not a candidate. So, this thing of tribalism, as you said, in the media is no help at all, because, they attack one person, but support another person. And the best example is when Fox News had a debate with Governor Gavin Newsom and DeSantis about which state is better. I mean, yeah, California is not doing too good. California is really on the poop level with the high taxation and spending and all that, and giving spending to illegal immigrants and all that, while the majority of residents of California are leaving that state, and that's why they need money for that. But Florida's no better. Yeah, Florida doesn't have a state income tax, and that's good, but it has a sales tax. But yet again, we are troubled with car insurance, health insurance, homeowners insurance, and where's the state government on that? So, Florida is not that great to begin with. Florida is a high cost of living state where everything is super expensive here, just like in California. And even California, I've spoken to people that actually moved from California, and says that they lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Beverly Hills that was $2,500 a month. $2,500 a month in Beverly Hills. And here in Coral Gables and Coconut Grove, it's up to maybe $4,500 a month. I'm like, how's that be? So Florida's not perfect. So this tribalism of Sean Hannity, kissing up to DeSantis and poo-pooing Gavin Newsom, it's enough already with this tribalism. And then, of course, Sean Hannity loves to kiss Trump's behind, and all these media pundits likes to kiss Trump's behind. Enough already. We're not here to elect a populist candidate. No matter, how much people love Andrew Jackson, or, William Jennings Bryan. This country was not based on populism. I hate it. That's why I hate this popular vote for president. I really do, because it's what's killing. And that's why I hate the 17th Amendment, because it draws out populism, and I despise populism. I'm all for giving it to the people and individual rights, but not that, because that creates distress and disorder and chaos and frustration and annoyance, and it's just bad. I'm all for the 9th Amendment, which is individual rights, but it's a different story than popular rights, because, as Seth has said, that the right to vote is not really a right, it's a privilege. You are privileged to vote. You're privileged to give a vote to this person. It's not your right. It never has become your right. But that unfortunately changed with the 15th Amendment, and it's a Civil War amendment, so that also comes to play as well. But it's when I see these plays of DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Vivek and all that, and these constant bicker, and then you see Chris Christie, he's dropping out, but he's not endorsing anybody, but he bath mouths Nikki Haley. Enough already. I'm exhausted. Just line up to what you believe in, and if you don't believe in the Constitution, then say it, but don't bash people, because it's pathetic. And frankly, this 2024 election is more pathetic than 2020. It's really more pathetic.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that should be understood, populism is not a guiding principle. Nope. And they've made it a guiding principle. It is kind of making us a democracy.
Yes.
The will of the majority, the tyranny of the majority.
Yes.
One can hold, I'm sure in many ways I hold populist sentiments, where I really believe in the people. If we were set free, I believe the American people could get through the problems that we have if we were just free and we had liberty as our guiding principle. So I think you can have some populist sentiments, but it's not a guiding principle. Our guiding principle should be liberty, and that's the big problem. And with this election, I think it just shows you how much the elections are controlled, because Nikki Haley might be the worst of the lot. And, I mean, she just wants to start every war possible. And, I just, the fact that she is the only one who might have a chance of dethroning Trump, it's scary to me. I mean, not to say I don't trust DeSantis at all, but DeSantis at least was sounding on some issues like like he was siding with liberty, even though he doesn't really, if people actually look at him. But Nikki Haley is like, she is all about big authoritarian state, and so of course is Trump, and it's just it's kind of scary to me that these are the quote unquote choices that we're supposed to have, and we're supposed to act as if there's any difference between these different sides. There's not. They're all authoritarians. They all want power. The only difference is in how they're going to use that power. And, here's a populist sentiment from me that I think the power should be in the people's hands. I think the people should have the power to control their own lives and not have power over other people. But everybody's looking for the candidate that they want to have power, and I want none of them to have power. I want them to be servants to us and protect our liberty.
Well, I'd be careful what you wish for, Seth, because that same sentiment gave us that 17th Amendment, and I'm up, and like I said, I believe in individual rights, and those are the people's rights, and it's embedded in the 9th Amendment, and I'm all for that. But when you give that much right to the public, that much right to the people, to to make those elections either for the U.S. House of Representation, which that's their people's house. That's the people's house. But the Senate is not the people's house. And when you give that much power, then you're going to create a lot of corruption and a lot of dismay and a lot of anxiety. I mean, we've seen it from time and time again, from when primaries and even general elections, in the Senate area, where right now, in the last one, where you had in Georgia, Herschel Walker versus Senator Warnock. And you had this, anxiety and, it's 50-49, 50-48, it's by 600 votes. Why are we even doing that? I mean, back then the legislators elected them and nobody even cared. And if they did care, they would vote out those legislators. But when you give that much right to the people, that's where I have issues, because, the people are easily to be misguided, to be led to be misguided. And that's what's happened, And then, again, you've seen it. I'm sure that, there's never been any proof on corruption prior to the 13th Amendment, to the 17th Amendment. But there was very minimal corruption. But then after that 7th Amendment passed, you've had multiple corruption issues. Right now with Bob Menendez of New Jersey, that guy is he's got gold bars in his freezer. He's got he's taking trips to wherever. So, but, if the American people would read the Constitution and would know their rights, certain rights are bestowed to us, we wouldn't be having this discussion. We wouldn't be, saying we want people's rights. No, we already have it. We don't need to tell the government what our rights are. We have it. Marriage, abortion, drugs, alcohol. That's our individual rights. Those are certain rights that belong to us. Financial affairs. Those are our rights. So, the government doesn't give us those rights. They're already there. So, one thing I want to bring up is the abortion issue. If Jane Roe would have sat down and says, it's not really a due process issue. It's an individual right. And it's my individual right to, get rid of this baby. Okay, fine. If you're a murderer, I have no problem, but it's your right, and if you want to get rid of it, fine, that's your deal. But sadly, the American people will always go by different routes, and lawyers will go by different routes, and that's why we created this Roe versus Wade decision that kind of just made a mockery of the Constitution. And because people don't read, don't read the Constitution, are not aware. And right now, I want people to read Article 2 and really focus on Article 2, because that's going to be, if Article 2 goes down by the courts, I hope it doesn't, it's going to really affect us, and it was going to bring this popular vote. People need to be aware of what rights are bestowed to us, and it's not by the federal government. It's not, and don't listen to Trump. Don't listen to these pundits. And as Seth said, Nikki Haley, yes, she's dangerous. DeSantis is also dangerous because he talks the talk with liberty, but he's behind that, war, military-industrial complex. I'm sure he's going to send troops to Israel and all that. So I don't trust anybody. Chris Christie, I don't trust. Vivek, I don't trust. So, yeah, that's why, I will abstain to vote because, again, there's no candidate that I like. And I've said this many times. People have asked me, who's your favorite politician or your statesman? And I said, living or dead, because presently there's nobody. So I go by dead. I wouldn't mind having a Coolidge. I wouldn't mind having a Goldwater or somebody like that. But at present times, there's nobody like that because they're all embedded in a centralized autocracy.
Yeah, I mean, the only person I can think of that, I think generally believes in the Constitution is Thomas Massey, and he's it's kind of hard to do anything when you're a lone voice, but this is also an issue that I have, is that we need to stop trusting politicians. I mean, even if you vote for somebody, you need to get on them. I mean, this is kind of what I thought about Donald Trump. Donald Trump has no principles. So in 2016, when I was planning on voting for Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, I voted for him in 2012, and he said something that, kind of exposed him as not being actually libertarian. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not voting for you anymore. And I decided to vote for Trump, as much as I didn't like him, because he wasn't Hillary. I mean, that was literally, I didn't know what Trump would turn out to be. But I thought, at least if conservatives who helped get him elected were to say, okay, Trump, we got you elected, now you're going to listen to us, that maybe something good could have come out of him. But instead, we get the cult that follows Trump, and whatever Trump says is golden. Well, that's the problem. I mean, whoever is in charge, whoever is elected, we need to hold them accountable. And it doesn't matter if it's your guy or not. When they violate the Constitution, we need to hold them accountable. I don't care how much you support them. If they say we're going to take the guns first, do the due process later, you absolutely remove your support from them. I mean, the comments from Trump like that, and he gets absolutely no pushback from conservatives. It's disgusting to me. And we need to stop idolizing these politicians, and we need to start holding them accountable. And but again, we're in this tribalist mentality, and that you don't hold your side accountable. You always want to go after the other side, and this is what we get.
Yeah, you're right. We have not brought up to accountability these politicians. Trump, Biden, Obama, W. Bush, Clinton. Clinton we did, but it was on a trumped-up, stupid charge of perjury on a sexual affair that was kind of dumb because they couldn't get him on Whitewater and Chinagate. But again, first Bush, Reagan. So, and then again, I would say Ford set the precedence of not holding them accountable because Ford pardoned Nixon. I think Ford shouldn't have pardoned Nixon, and Nixon should have gone to jail for whatever high crimes and misdemeanors that the House would have impeachment on. but he resigned, but he was still accountable. So, no president is above the law. So if Trump thinks, as Nixon once said in the interview with, what's his name? The famous interview with the English, David Frost, he's saying that, when a president does it, it's not illegal. That's just a BS statement of, you shouldn't do anything illegal in the first place. So, it's this, you're right, tribalism that, Trump says, I think that statement that Trump says, take the guns first and then use due process, that should be a definition from Congress to be a high crime and misdemeanor. He's disobeying the Second Amendment. So, and the Fourth Amendment, for God's sakes. It's really despicable, this tribalism that's become, and the media doesn't help, and just ludicrous all around. But there's something else that I want to pinpoint what you said. Let me see here. It was tribalism, something else, and I kind of just lost. I lost what you said, but I was gonna say, but it's when you brought up libertarians, I mean, even the third party even the Constitution Party or the Libertarian Party, they're not for limited government because they want to increase healthcare providers for abortion people or healthcare providers for anybody. I mean, there's not really anybody truly that's for limited federal government. I don't care about state government. Because you live in the state, you have to focus on your state legislators and your governor and your judicial court system, and that's your responsibility. But the federal government, every single national politician that's out there, libertarian, socialist, Constitution, Republican, Democrat, they're out for one thing and one thing only: to increase the size of the federal government, either through the social programs, which mainly is the Democrats and Republicans now because DeSantis wants to protect Social Security, or the military-industrial complex and build up the Defense Department. So, I really have no trust in any candidate that's running for national office, even senators. I will not vote for senators. I don't know if any of my senators are open up for election, but I will not cast my vote for them because they just want to increase the national government by, bringing home the bacon, or as Conrad Burns once said, and I keep saying it, delivering for Montana, delivering for Florida, delivering for Illinois. I don't want that. So I'm abstaining for federal office because I don't want to increase the size of the federal government. I'm done with it, increasing the size of the federal government. I want it to be decreased, and people need to be aware of that. And Trump is not helping, and these candidates are not helping. So I want to reach out to people out there. Don't vote for these people because they're not helping you. They're not going to help you. They just want to increase the federal government to feather their own nest.
Yeah, that's what we've got, and that's why state and local is where, and why I think the most important position on a ballot is the sheriff, because if you got a good sheriff, they have more power locally to protect your liberty than any other office. So, focus in locally, and when I say focus in locally, it's not even just elections. Focus locally on your own life and making your life better on your own without the government. That's where the focus needs to be. And when it comes to elections, make sure you get candidates on the ballot who are going to stand up and defy an overzealous federal government. The federal government does not have all the power. In fact, the federal government is supposed to have very little power and very little authority. So if you get local candidates who are willing to say, yeah, we're not going to listen to the federal government here because the Constitution doesn't give you authority there. That's the best chance of getting something done. the federal government is beyond corrupt. There's really no reason to vote for any of them, even if, like, you and I might disagree on Thomas Massey, but even if Thomas Massey is great, it's not like he can get anything done. I mean, that's reality. So focus locally and just be prepared for a bumpy 2024 in many ways, one of which being the election and all the insanity that comes from it.
Yeah, no, I mean, Thomas Massey, he has been outspoken on Trump on some issues, but yet again, I think in 2020 he kind of went along with it. I think the more outspoken critic of Trump was Justin Amash. And that's why he left the Republican Party. Thomas Massey's still there. No, he's a nice guy, and he's a pretty strict kind of guy. But yeah, you're right. It's a lone voice, just like Justin Amash, just like Jeff Flake. It's a lone voice, and you're not going to do anything because, again, the majority of them are in bed with the federal government. And as Seth said, focus locally, focus on statewide issues, not nationwide issues, not for state. National Senate elections, but just locally on your state rep, state Senate, governor, courts, sheriff, and just follow our motto. I think I can say, Seth and I, we will have this hashtag abstain 2024 because we have no interest. I mean, I've been putting that, and I know Seth will probably follow that too. Hashtag abstain 2024 because it's not going to help us one bit. So I say to you guys, let's abstain, because it's going to be a circus, and whoever wins, whether it's Nikki Haley or DeSantis, it's not going to do any difference. Or Biden again, or Kennedy, or Marianne Williamson, it's not going to make one shred of difference. So my recommendation to you guys is abstain. Hashtag abstain 2024. How about you, Seth? What's your last thing?
I agree with you. I guess abstinence is the best protection from tyranny. It's but seriously, just don't vote. My non-vote is my vote because there's always this lie that if you don't vote, you don't have a right to complain. Well, I like George Carlin's line on that, there's no logic in that, because if you do vote and you vote these corrupt people in, you're the ones who put them in their positions, so you're the ones who have no right to complain. So, even if there's nobody on the ballot that I plan to vote for locally even, I probably will still go and pick up a ballot and turn it in blank, just so people know that this is my vote. I'm not voting for any of them. Focus locally and, ignore the circus.
Yeah, and just to coin that, I love that George Carlin bit, so... if you don't vote, you have a right to complain because you didn't put those corrupt individuals in. So you have a right. The ones who put those in, you don't have a right to complain. You put those in, keep your mouth shut, and do something next time. But yeah, that's a good bit. But and on that note, hashtag abstain 2024. Seth, it's always a pleasure. We'll see you guys on next Sunday, and have a great night.
Good night.